Hi everyone, it's Charlie. Hopefully you guys have had a chance to see the Game of Thrones finale by now. This is just going to dig a little bit deeper into what's going on in the finale and some of the big questions that they answered and what I think is going to be different in George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire book ending. Some things will be the same from a plot perspective, but some things will be very different, so I'll try to explain as we go through these big beats. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the Game of Thrones A Song of Ice and Fire videos. I'll start talking about the prequel later this week too, but there's still a lot of finale stuff that we have to unpack about the main series. We'll do a new round of the HBO Now giveaway. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave a comment about the finale on the video. Obviously, careful for spoilers for everything that happened in the Game of Thrones finale. But starting with number 10, Bran's new 6 kingdoms. So Bran the Broken in his new realm. I do like the jokes and memes I've been seeing about Bran being the villain of the story because he did very little in terms of actually helping people involved win the Iron Throne. He just served as bait for the Night King and told them the story of what the Night King was after and how he was this living memory of everything. They just sort of chilled out in the north while everybody fought with each other when he actually claims that he saw this happening in the future. He knew that they would ask him to become king, so why didn't he say anything? Does that make him kind of a villain? Yes and no. He's more ambiguous, it's more of a gray area, just because he's not good, he's not evil, he lost a lot of his humanity, but it seems like he does still have a sense of humor. But he's basically the Westerosi equivalent of the internet now, near omniscient, so he is a very powerful person. The show did not do a great job of getting that across. He actually has way more abilities than you saw him use on the TV show. But his first act as king, as they say at the end of the episode, in that final scene with him, is to rebuild the realm, aka Bran the Builder or Bran the Broken Builder. In pursuit of that, he'll be using his perfect recall and everyone's secrets against them from a political perspective to keep any new Littlefinger hopefuls from derailing any economic and political stability in the realm. He'll also probably help fact-check the collective knowledge of the Citadel with the Grand Maester Samwell's help at some point. When he says they need a new Master of Whispers, Master of War, and Master of Laws, they don't have a lot of good options in terms of who's left alive in terms of show characters for Master of Whispers, but they could always look east to any Westerosi nobles that have been living in disgrace and exile after Robert's Rebellion to bring back to become their new Master of War. Otherwise, I would say Bronn would probably be their best option, but for some weird reason they made him Master of Coin. As for Master of Laws, that's not quite as big of a position, so really anyone with the requisite legal experience would probably be fine. The last thing that Bran mentions in the episode is that he'll use his abilities to accurately locate Drogon, who they say was last seen headed east. They don't say where exactly because they cut Samwell off, but I think that they're winking at the idea that Drogon is headed back to the ruins of ancient Valyria in the Valyrian Peninsula. Big question, how close is Bran's ending, him becoming king, to George R. R. Martin's intended book ending? I'll say Bran is still probably going to become king, but the way that they arrive at that decision will probably make a lot more sense. Just because you have POV chapters, Bran is a very central character in George R. R. Martin's story, but the TV show hasn't done a great job of utilizing him. He even sat out all of season 5, so in the books, Bran is just a much more active participant in the stuff that's going on in the story. Number 9, Bran's new small council. So Tyrion is Hand of the King, Samwell is his Grand Maester, Brienne is commander of the Kingsguard, Davos is master of ships, and Bronn, mysteriously, has become master of coin. Their first act is to obtain financing to rebuild King's Landing, Bronn preferring that they start with the brothels, Davos preferring that they start with the port and the new fleet of ships. Big callback to Tyrion's childhood, he tasks Samwell with upgrading the sewer system in King's Landing, which is probably one of the smartest things that Tyrion will be remembered for after he dies, because that's really huge in terms of preventing a lot of easily avoidable diseases and illnesses in a population. Maybe then they'll write a book about Tyrion and the amazing sewer system that he was responsible for. They're also in the process of rebuilding the Red Keep, obviously, but it seems like Bran will always use his favorite chair that he specially made for himself after Targaryen design to be his permanent throne, so to speak. You can't steal the throne from Bran if he always takes the throne with him wherever he goes. How close is the ending for all these characters to the books, though? Tyrion is probably still going to wind up being Hand of the King just because he's such an important character from a POV perspective. Samwell eventually becoming Grand Maester, even if it's not right away, feels relatively accurate. Maybe he just goes back and finishes his training as a Maester, then Bran names him as his Grand Maester. Big change though, I don't think that Bronn is going to be a big part of this book ending. I think that he was only involved in this scene because he's such a popular TV show character, so that's why there was so much extra Bronn stuff seemingly going on the last couple of seasons. I don't know that Davos is going to wind up being on this small council either in the books, because Liam Cunningham has just been a really popular character amongst the producers, in the cast, and the fans, so they just keep bringing him back and giving him an even bigger role. So I don't think he'll be quite so big in the books. Number 8, Sansa becomes Queen of the North when she permanently annexes it, and that also includes everything north of the Wall as well, including the lands of Always Winter. Her first act will be to name new lords to the Last Hearth to replace the Umbers, to Bear Island to replace the Mormonts, and then they'll just slowly rebuild the parts of the north that were destroyed by the White Walkers or the war with the Boltons in the castles like Winterfell, rebuilding their forces. I think part of the logic of Sansa wanting to annex the North was to prevent them from being forced into any subsequent wars that Westeros gets involved in involving the throne or any southern conflicts. And even though Bran controls the Wall as king, really the responsibility for supplying the newly reformed Night's Watch will fall on her as she's the closest noble. Usually the king looks to the Warden of the North to manage the Wall, and then they'll petition the crown for any extra reinforcements or supplies if they need it. I know you're asking, why do they need a Night's Watch if there are no more White Walkers? I think the idea is that it's just sort of a catch-all for people that don't want to live out their lives in a cell. It is an option for nobles with situations like Samwell's where you have a succession issue with a younger son that the Lord wants to pass his title to, but really their duty now is more as a glorified chain gang. I don't know if they're going to repair that part of the wall that fell down. You'd actually need giants to help out with that. Supposedly it was Bran the Builder working with giants with the Children of the Forest using magic to help build the wall. So I think for the most part, because there's no real threat north of the wall right now, there'll just continue to be a very small glorified police group in that area in the far north. If Sansa chooses to take a husband, there are several eligible bachelors in Westeros now amongst the nobles, but I'm sure Sweet Robin is going to try and throw his hat in the ring several more times as they grow older, but I expect her to eventually take a northern husband over a Southron one. I don't expect her to ever get married to Gendry or anything like that. Like she said though, it probably wouldn't have worked out between her and Tyrion. Tyrion himself is also free to get married again if he ever falls in love, and Tyrion is now de facto Lord of Casterly Rock, Warden of the West, and the tallest Lannister. For the most part, I think that Sansa's ending is pretty accurate to the books. I do think that eventually she'll sort of become the new Catelyn Stark, Lady of the North, and manage everything, although I'm not expecting book Sansa to annex the North. That might just be a TV show thing. 7. Arya's adventures in the Western Hemisphere. So despite Arya saying that no one knows what's west of Westeros, there are historical records of people from the western continent beyond the Sunset Sea sailing to the Iron Islands tens of thousands of years ago, becoming the progenitors of the Ironborn. But that's about it. We just have vague records of people from the west sailing to Westeros a long time ago. I wouldn't be surprised if one of the prequel shows is set there. There were hints that George R. R. Martin that he might do some sort of Arya sequel story at some point about her continuing adventures in an adult after the events of the main novels. So Arya's ending, traveling away, setting off for adventure, feels fairly accurate to the books. That line, what's west of Westeros, is a TV show thing, it's not a book thing, so she might just go back to Braavos or the east somewhere too. 6. The Unsullied and the Dothraki go their separate ways. As Grey Worm says, the Unsullied are traveling to Missandei's home of Noth, down there to protect her people from slavers or anyone that might seek to do them harm. The Dothraki seem like they're headed back east to resume what they were doing before Daenerys killed all the cows, just continuing to rule in the Great Grass Sea, but maybe a few of them decide to stay in Westeros to settle in the Reach. But the book ending for these characters will probably be a little bit different, and then most of them will just travel back east. 5. Drogon flies away with Daenerys' body. It's most likely that he took her body back to Dragonstone. The caves where the old Targaryen dragons were hatched and roosted are still there, so he probably took her body there, then headed east towards Essos. I think they're winking at the idea of him going back to the ruins of the 14 Flames in ancient Valyria, like we saw him flying overhead in that region during Season 5 when Tyrion and Jorah were sailing through ancient Valyria. It's really hard to say how accurate this is going to be to his book ending. Drogon just flying off to live free for the rest of his life does feel like a book thing, but I don't know if he would carry Daenerys' body away like that, and I don't know that he would immediately burn the Iron Throne. I like the joke that Drogon sees the pointy knife sticking out of Daenerys and then sees all the pointy things sticking out of the Iron Throne, thinking that the Iron Throne was responsible for killing Daenerys. What might wind up happening in the books, though, is that Daenerys winds up using Drogon to melt the Iron Throne, or if it's not melted by Drogon, then Bran and any other survivors, the new small council, wind up melting it down, symbolically destroying it. But for Jaime and Cersei dying together when Daenerys destroys part of the Red Keep, this is probably going to be very different in the books. I'm expecting more of a payoff for the Valonqar prophecy for Jaime, so maybe in the books they still wind up dying together, but Jaime is more responsible for her death. But book Jaime was always probably going to eventually go back to Cersei. It's just that he was going to stay with Brienne for a much much longer period in the books before he goes back. The part about the Valonqar prophecy about a younger queen coming to take all that Cersei holds dear will still also probably be Daenerys in the books and not Marjorie, just like the TV show. 3. Daenerys sacking King's Landing and turning into another tyrant just like her father the Mad King. This is another one of those things that I feel like is fairly accurate to the books, but the way they get her there, how and why she turns, will be very different. A much clearer progression from well-meaning ingenue warrior Queen Daenerys to full-blown Mad Queen Daenerys after she's lost everything that she holds dear. So book Daenerys will also probably lose Rhaegal and Viserion, all the people around her that she really cares about that have been helping advise her this whole time. Book Jon Snow will still probably wind up killing her, fulfilling the Nissa part of the Azor High prophecy, sort of paying off the Jon, Prince who was promised, a Song of Ice and Fire. The reason why people think that this is going to be the book ending is because when Martin told Dan and Dave about what his planned ending for the books was, he told them 3 big WTF moments that they could use to benchmark their series as big signposts. The first thing he told them was about Jon Snow being resurrected. The second thing he told them was about how Hodor got his name, remember, hold the door. Then they said that they would never reveal what the third thing Martin told them was because it was from the very end of the story, and that was probably about Daenerys turning into the Mad Queen and going completely off the rails with Jon Snow having to kill her. So number 2, the war with the White Walkers in the books will also probably go down very differently. There is no Night King yet in Martin's books. It's possible that he could introduce some sort of prime White Walker, but it's more likely that the War for the Dawn will be more of a collective effort with the characters wielding Valyrian swords being more responsible for taking down each of the separate White Walkers. And even though Arya Stark has really important skills and will probably kill a White Walker, she by herself will not zero them out single-handedly. And the White Walkers will also probably not bring down the wall with an undead dragon. It'll probably be the Horn of Winter as described in the books, the way they've been teasing that. Number 1, of course, though, Jon Snow takes the black as penance for regicide, killing the queen, and goes back to the wall. This is another one of those events in the books that I think will be similar, but the reason why he goes back to the north will probably be very different. This gets more into Martin's planned, bittersweet ending, talking about Tolkien. So Martin has said that his ending in the books will be very reminiscent of Tolkien's ending for The Lord of the Rings. When you examine it through that lens, Jon Snow is basically the Frodo of the series. Like I said, he has almost more POV chapters than any other character besides Tyrion. So the story is basically about Jon Snow. He's Frodo, he destroys the One Ring in fire, basically him killing Daenerys, then like Frodo suffers wounds through the course of his journey that will never heal fully. Remember when Tormund slapped Jon Snow when they were all having drinks in episode 4 and he winced in pain? That's because a lot of his stab wounds from when he was resurrected have not fully healed. So just like Frodo, he too boards a boat at the end to go back to his version of the Grey Havens, which is essentially the Wall in the Night's Watch. There was a lot of confusion about that final scene with him taking the wildlings north of the wall with Ghost. Here's the thing about that. There was a big speech that Jon had, quoting Maester Aemon, talking about how duty and honor were the death of love. Would you choose honor and duty over someone that you loved? Jon Snow chooses his duty to the realm over his love for Daenerys. That's why he killed her, because he had this staunch Ned Stark level honor till the very end. So if honor and duty were such an important foundation for his character along every step of the way, then I don't think that he'd suddenly take the Night's Watch vows to serve and protect the realm, father no children, to then turn right around in his final scene and abandon his honor by deserting the Night's Watch. So I think all he's doing in this final scene here is just helping take the wildlings back north of the wall to reclaim the far north, because there's no more White Walkers, so there's no threat to them, so they have all this territory to settle in again. After that, he'll probably just come back and continue to man the Night's Watch as the 1000th Lord Commander. But I never expect them to have like a really huge Night's Watch anymore, unless they just suddenly have this proliferation of criminals that they don't want to throw in prison. But if you have any other big questions about the finale or things that happened at the end that I didn't answer in this video, let me know in the comments. I am doing a finale Q&A video in the next day or two, so leave all your questions that you want me to include on that on this video. There'll be a couple more bonus videos this week. I'll talk about the Game of Thrones prequel, and then don't forget there's going to be a bonus episode of Game of Thrones next Sunday. I'll do a video for that too. If you're wondering what's coming next, obviously there's the Game of Thrones prequel, which is supposed to premiere sometime next year. There's His Dark Materials, the Watchmen series coming later this year, the Amazon Lord of the Rings TV series, which might start next year, then the Witcher Netflix series, which I'll also be doing videos for. So all those things that I just talked about, I'll be doing videos for that stuff. I'll do trailer videos for that stuff as we start to get new footage. There was also a new Westworld Season 3 trailer, so if you do have any requests, leave them in the comments below. Congratulations to the giveaway winner from my last big video too, Leopold. Please email me on the About page of my channel so I can get your details. While you wait for everything, click here for